we're 530 episodes in, and you might have noticed something by this point. I'm not one for getting angry at video games. Dislike? Sure. Disappointed in them? Far too often. But angry? It's gotta be something truly vicious and hateful towards players for me to get angry. Meiji Ishin made me angry. The final Famicom game from terrible game publisher Use is not only their worst out of a library of awful games, it's one of the worst things on the Famicom. And it's the kind of awful game that you'd just be completely unaware of unless you did a deep dive into the system library. Meiji Ishin is the Japanese term for the Meiji Restoration, a period of civil war in the 19th century that saw the shogun removed from power, the emperor restored, and a lot of democratic reforms implemented. It's considered the beginning of modern Japan. The game has you stepping into the shoes of Ryoma Sakamoto, one of the key historical figures from that period. Naturally, as a video game, this gets the history all wrong, but we won't hold that against it. The game is divided into two halves. First, you play out an adventure game as you search for allies and deal with the shogun's troops. After you've completed your adventure, the game changes and becomes a strategy game where you have to conquer Japan and eventually capture the shogun. Both halves of this game are terrible, though. The adventure game initially looks very similar to other adventure games we've seen. You have a menu of verbs and you select what you want to do. But right off the bat, there's some weird things. Like there's two different options for speaking with people. Now some of that has to do with how Japanese works, but other adventure games have merged all of their communication commands into one. And the way that this is structured makes it impossible to power your way through the game by just picking everything. When you talk to someone, you often have to make a decision. And so if you go through and pick the other option, then you've undone that. And the flags for what lets you continue aren't really clear. There's a lot of going back and forth trying to trip the next event. And unfortunately, going back and forth is the absolute worst part of the adventure game. You see, rather than just going to a destination, you declare where you're going to go, and then set out on the road, and then you slowly walk down it. You might meet some people on the road, and they could be friendly, or you could wind up in a fight with them. It takes a very, very long time to get anywhere in the game. For example, here's how the early game progresses. After a long text introduction, you decide to head off to Edo. You go on a march, and then you reach a checkpoint. At the checkpoint, the guard won't let you through, so you turn around and march all the way back home. At your home, you get a letter that will let you pass through the gate, so then you march back to the checkpoint. And at the checkpoint, you turn over the letter, and then you go through another long march to reach the dojo where you learn how to fight. Also, your master has really weird eyebrows. If you know exactly what you're doing, you're now about 15 minutes into the game. And that brings me to the combat. Your master with the weird eyebrows engages in some mock combat with you. As you're fighting, a dot will appear on him. You press in that direction and hit the appropriate button. A green dot means he'll attack you, so you press in that direction and hit B. A red dot means you can attack him, so you press in that direction and hit A. Timing matters here. It's really easy to be faster than the indicator. If you press the button before it turns into an explosion, you have no effect. So now you engage in a duel with your master for about a minute, and then you repeat that 4 times. Okay, now you're ready to defend yourself when you get attacked. You won't be attacked for about another half hour or so, but you're ready. This is also the point when you can finally save the game. There's 3 save slots in Meiji Ishin. Remember that, it's important. To save, you have to march your way over to an inn, and then pay to rest there. Now you may notice that I don't have footage of the inn. I'll get to that. So how does combat work? Well, first you're approached by someone, and then you have the choice to either approach them or attempt to hide. If you approach them and they're friendly, then you have an opportunity to talk. But nobody you meet on the road will say anything useful, so there's no need. You can also choose to hide. If you do this, then you pick one of 3 trees, and then the person who is approaching picks one of those 3 trees and tries to find you. If they catch you, and I've never successfully evaded them, then you initiate combat. And what you do for your inputs is the same as your training with your master, but now when you hit somebody, you do as much damage as that number in the lower left-hand corner. That number constantly cycles, and if it comes up 0, then you don't do any damage. While recording, I had it come up 0 7 times in a row. And it takes quite a while in between times where you can attack and defend. So those 7 consecutive zeros were basically a full minute of combat where I didn't make any progress. More annoyingly, you can be attacked by multiple enemies, and then they each fight you one at a time. A combat with 2 opponents took me 4 minutes and 22 seconds to complete. 4 minutes and 22 seconds of this. There was no way to speed it up or make it go faster. You can't really control how much damage you're going to hit for, so all you can do is just keep going until the combat mercifully ends. On my way to an inn to save, I was accosted by 3 opponents at the same time, so I could spend the next roughly 7 to 10 minutes fighting all of them, or I could slam that reset button and load up a save at the other half of the game. One more thing about the adventure game segment before I move on. At one point a character asks you if it would be nice to have a backup life. Answer yes and the game continues as normal. Answer no and it deletes your save game behind your back. So if you don't go back to an inn and save, you're in for a nasty surprise. Wait, did I say it erased your game? Sorry about that. It actually erases all of the save games on the cartridge. Hope you're not sharing with a sibling. There's less interesting things to say about the strategy game half of Meiji Ishin, although it is just as broken as the adventure game. It's very similar to other strategy games that we've seen. You control a province and you can hire troops, improve the quality of the land, or go to war. When you attack a neighboring province, you get a tactical map, and that is one of the big problems here. The game gives the computer player loads of cannons. Cannons can outrange everyone and kill most units in a single shot. So the computer just has its cannons stand still, and then you are forced to move into cannon range. You can't move and attack, so you're inevitably shot by a cannon the moment you get into range. This example combat is not just me being bad. This is how all of the provincial combat in the game works. On top of that, every command in the strategy game requires using a bit of energy. And if your commanders run out of energy, then they die. It's very easy to get yourself into a death spiral, where your energy is just too low to be able to do anything. For that reason, people recommend making one save at the start of the strategy game segment, and then never saving the game again. Meiji Ishin is virtually unplayable. It's also a game that drags itself out, works to maximize frustration, and spits in the player's eye repeatedly. Right now, I think I would put it down as the worst Famicom adventure game. Maybe I'll encounter something worse, but I really hope I don't.